everyone, my name is Taeyeon Kim. Today, I'm going to talk about coronavirus disease-19. Coronavirus disease-19 goes beyond a health issue and affects economy, social culture, and politics. So, I investigated it. Therefore, the purpose of this study is to examine the impact of coronavirus disease-19 on the international community and find strategies for coping with it. Coronavirus disease-19 means a respiratory infection disease that has been spread worldwide in China since 2019 and is abbreviated as COVID-19. Including all countries in the world as well as those in this picture, the number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 is about 12 million as from July 2020. First of all, from an economic perspective, the trade of China and the United States, which have a large portion of the global economy, slowed down. Thus, a negative impact will be expanded, which will lead to a global financial crisis and a foreign exchange crisis. Compared to a case of SARS, when SARS occurred, the international society responded to that economic crisis by diversifying exporting countries. In order to counteract COVID-19, governments must follow a pattern of responding to SARS, which could stabilize prices. In addition, the government should take over global companies whose corporate value has already fallen and respond so that the trade does not slow down. If we respond in that way, economic activity is expected to be recovered gradually as time goes by. Second, in terms of a socio-cultural aspect, COVID-19 reduced global exchanges such as overseas travel and spread untact culture. When people have to meet each other unavoidably, a unicultural wearing masks could be used to ensure that not only themselves but also others don't feel insecure. Compared to a case of H1N1, medicines and vaccines were developed when H1N1 had occurred, so people could respond to the disease effectively. Thus, imitating that case, we should try to develop drugs and vaccines as well as masks to stop COVID-19. And for the cross of untaxed service sectors, companies must strive to integrate the BL industry and the AL industry with the manufacturing industry. Third, from a political point of view, when COVID-19 had occurred, countries took self-centered measures which intensified conflict among countries. In addition, a responsibility battle between China and the US makes the international society more confusing. Compared to a case of MERS, when MERS broke out, a government asked reporters not to announce confirmed cases, but it was a long choice. Cases of battle like MERS provide a hint to us that they should not try to hide pandemics. Therefore, we'll have to discuss a new international order with an open mind and make an alliance among countries. If we do so, it is expected that the role of the Republic of Korea will be expanded and its status will be reconsidered in the process of overcoming COVID-19. So far, I have explained the impact of COVID-19 on the international society and future countermeasures in economy, social culture, and politics. COVID-19 reminds us that issues of human security are as important as those of military security. Thank you for listening.